Right, everybody, man. Oh man, the Chevis, I got a guy on the channel that I'm excited that he is on Strong Inspirations. Let me tell you, I'm Anthony Brogdon, and I'm coming at you again and again and again and again, where I find these people who are experts, and this is their job. This is what they study. This is what they do. This is how they live. They talk about it a lot themselves, so I know they know what they're talking about. And I've asked them kindly to come on Strong Inspirations so we can do this. Give it to you straight, no chaser. Let me tell you, I found this gentleman somehow, I'm just doing research and whatnot, and I saw some pictures. I saw the name of his organization, and I said, whoa, let me see if there's something here. And I called and I got through. He got handlers now. He got people. I got no people, but I had the people that I don't have call his people, and he called me back and said, I'll do it. I'm excited. There's a few things going on here at Strong Inspirations. First of all, I've been thinking I'm coming out with a Strong Inspirations sweatshirt so that you can get you a sweatshirt. It's gonna be real nice material, so on and so forth. Watch out for that. I'm having my own festival, Memorial Day weekend 2022 in Quindaro, Kansas, May 27th through the 29th. That's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Friday, we're going to party in a barn, so wear your dusty blue jeans and your dusty shirt. We're going to drink a little bit of moonshine and some sweet tea with not a lot of sugar. We're going to eat some good stuff, good food, healthy food. Saturday, we're going to take a tour of Quindaro. Now, if you don't know Quindaro, watch the video on the channel where I interviewed a guy named Anthony Hope, whose great-great-grandfather was enslaved in Missouri. My man so bad, in a good way, he walked across the Missouri River when it froze and ended up in Quindaro. Then he's so tight that he started a business and got some money and did good with his family. And so that's Quindaro. So again, we're going to take tours of Quindaro. I'm trying to find a boat that will sail down the Missouri River. But if I can't, we're going to go walk to the edge at least. I'm trying to see if we can sleep outside and camp, those who want to, because I would like to do that. I ain't been camping but twice. That might be nice. And you could feel the voices of those people. But if not, there's some hotels nearby. I'm only accepting 1,000 people to come. I can handle 1,000. There's going to be a weekend fee that's very reasonable, so on and so forth. How about this? And then we're going to have a black picnic. I got to use the word picnic because now you understand what I'm saying. Where we're going to eat and have a health fair and just a whole bunch of live music and everything. And then Sunday, we're going to have church service and libations and whatnot. That's going to be May 27th through the 29th. Stay tuned. A lot of stuff is happening here. But what I'm asking you to do is this. Subscribe to the channel. It don't cost nothing. And I had a lady call me. She said, well, what does subscribe mean? It don't mean anything, but you follow me. You follow the channel. That's all it does. And I think I'm coming up with some special stuff for my subscribers because I'm thinking a lot about this because I'm on to something. I want you to hit the like button on this video because my man, he's sitting there, he's patient. He the CEO of this company. Oh, watch out, people. Watch out. This guy gonna put it down on you. So like this video, hit the notifications bell when the videos come up. And as you are watching me, I do 4 or 5 videos a week. I've done 2 a day where I released them. I had one guy hit me up. I interviewed him 2 weeks ago. I got so much content. He said, when my video coming on? I said, okay, I'll bring it up tomorrow. And you got to watch that one. Robert McCoy followed his family back to the 1600s. It's that kind of thing I find. And I put up on here on Strong Inspirations. And then do this, my friends. Tell somebody about us. Don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Share them videos. Tell people to subscribe. If everybody did 5 people, I'll reach my goal. I want 5,000 subscribers by the end of this year, which is a lot. Matter of fact, our 1-year anniversary, I got to come up with the actual date. I want to say it's in November. We're not a year old yet, and we jamming. I got over 150 videos on this channel. I'm getting to my guest real shortly here. I'd like for you to watch my movie. I'm a filmmaker. It's called Business in the Black, The Rise of Black Business in America. 75 powerful minutes. I got one guy in the film that when I interviewed him, he was 101 years old. And his closing remarks is, you can't tell me nothing. How slaves went to college, Black millionaires in the 1800s, how we learned how to read and write is all in here. I took it to 40 cities on my own dime. It's streaming on Amazon. And now I'm in the process of putting it up on Tubi and Hulu and some of them other services. Do this right now. After this video, go to businessintheblack.net and order my book. Black Business Book is similar to the movie. It's got 200 facts. I'm blowing you away. I'll tell you this, how about this? I was playing tennis because I get my exercise on. I was playing tennis yesterday and I'm taking the books everywhere I go. I had a book in my tennis bag. I showed the guy, he's looking through it. He say, man, hold on. I didn't read but 2 pages. You sure you telling the truth in this? I said, yeah, man, the link is in the back of the book. He said, I never heard those type facts. I'm not even gonna tell you what it was. And if you read my book and you don't learn nothing new, I give your money back. How about a book with a money back guarantee? You ain't never heard of that. Here it is. This is going to blow you away. Get you a copy of this book and I will autograph it. And that might mean something. I'm sure it's going to mean something one day. I keep jamming like I'm jamming. So get you a copy of Black Business Book. It's on businessintheblack.net. I'm telling you, this is strong. Over 200 facts. All right, my friends, we almost had my man, the guest. He's sitting there. You know what I got to say right now, though, my friends. I use that word strong a lot. Strong stands for strength, tenacity, resilience, and a sense of oneness, nobility, and grace. That's my introduction to my guest. He's a strong man. That's what I heard. And I heard it from more than one person because I vetted him. He vetted me. I vetted him. We had to check each other out. And I know he the real deal. Come on, my friend. Come on and tell us your name and let's get it on. Thank you for being on Strong Inspirations.
Thank you for having me. My name is Eric Jacobson. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Battle of Franklin Trust. We manage 3 house museums directly related to the pre-war era, but the Civil War era as well as post-war. So that's the intro.
Okay, let me tell you. Hold on, I don't mean no disrespect and interrupting you. Where are you from?
Well, I was born and raised in Minnesota, but I spent about 15 years in Arizona, and I've lived in Tennessee for about 20 years.
And is history always been a love of yours?
Always. That and baseball, as far back as I can remember. That was it for me.
Why? How did that happen? Do you know?
You know, I don't really know. I think part of my love of history is because I grew up around a handful of guys who were World War II and Korea vets. So I had a sense of, their place in history. And I think it went from there. And it was just a love of all American history.
Okay.
I ended up gravitating toward the Civil War, but it was from the beginning right up to the present day.
Now, in Minnesota, is there any Black history moment that kind of comes to mind that you remember or that happened in that town going back to the early days?
Oh, where I came from, absolutely not. That where I came from was as white could be.
Really?
Our Black representatives in Minnesota when I was growing up were Prince and Kirby Puckett.
And okay, well, how you get to be so conscious then to understand the plight and want to do this for a career? Was this, again, your mind, is there something there? You had to go against the grain. If that wasn't the attitude, someone had to enlighten you.
Yeah, well, there's truth in that. I've been accused on more than one occasion of being woke, and I think I've gotten to the point where I just say, yeah, actually, I'm awake. I'm paying attention. For me, I think it was the Civil War. I started my research. What really brought me here is I was a writer.
Okay.
So I wrote a nonfiction book about what's called the Tennessee Campaign. It's the last major campaign of the American Civil War. But everywhere I went, everything I looked at, if you could, kind of open up your eyes beyond the military perspective, slavery was everywhere. The Black experience was soaked into everything about the war. And then if you dialed the clock back, everything about American politics, especially in the 20 years before the Civil War, was soaked in slavery and the Black experience. And so, I think it just became self-evident that the two were interconnected. And then in recent years, the post-war experiences are all tied into the Black experience. Reconstruction, its successes directly impacted the Black community. But then when Reconstruction ends and it sets the stage for Jim Crow, then that is so much about the Black experience. And I know, so personally, that's what I did. But I know personally where I came from.
Sure.
It was easy. In fact, it was almost like breathing. If you were white, you didn't have to pay attention to what was happening in Mississippi or, frankly, on the south side of Chicago in 1880, 1940, or 1980.
Yeah,
for white folks who came where I'm from, Detroit was as far away as, Sacramento, California. You watch Good Times. Well, that was TV show. It didn't dawn on many people, I think, that was actually the reality. So the last thing I'll say is the last 10 years especially have been groundbreaking and earth-shaking in the historic community. And I think for a lot of people, the day that a young man walked into a church in South Carolina just 6 years ago and killed people in a church because of the color of their skin, it forced a lot of people to begin to reckon with.
Okay, since we on the Civil War, and that's what we're going to kind of focus on, let me ask you this. How strong do you believe in, and I'm not saying you, I'm saying hypothetically, do you believe in the institution of slavery that you're going to fight in a war and give your life? Because they had to, I got one guy on the channel, he said there was close to 700,000 people that died. And if that's how many died, it might be twice that many that were injured. I'm a guy in the field. I'm a, white guy, and I do whatever I do in South Carolina or something like that. And I'm going to sign up in a war that I might not come home for, just so that I can continue to have slavery.
If there is not African slavery in the United States of America in the 19th century, there is no Civil War. Right. There is no way in hell that the two factions, the two white factions of the country, would have come to blows if it is not for slavery.
Right.
Because slavery in the South wasn't just about ownership, because as we know, many people did not, many white people, especially among soldiers, did not own slaves. But slavery was, what's slavery about? Race, and race is about a way of life. And you can see that for at least a century at a minimum after the Civil War. So the idea of fighting for your way of life is, again, like breathing. Now, in the North, you have men who initially are fighting, and they have all the sort of, bigoted racial prejudices that the average white person in America did then, but they were fighting for this idea that the United States should not come apart. And I'm gonna,
Right. I got you.
This will probably lead to where we're going.
Right.
But by 1863, white soldiers also knew they were fighting now to end slavery, whether they liked it or not, and many didn't. Because listen, this is one thing, as a white guy, I'm perfectly comfortable speaking about all the subjects, but I can tell you what white people think.
Right.
And there were lots of white Northerners who hated slavery, but didn't care for black people. That's just a truth.
Well, let me ask you this: is that I hate slavery because I got a conscience, and I know that they're mistreating people?
Good question. Some of them, yes, but some of them were sick of the politics of slavery constantly ripping the fabric of the country apart. You can't compare slavery to anything, but sometimes we try and encourage guests to think about the most toxic of topics today. Look at how controversial abortion may be. Well, multiply that times 100, and then you might get close to what slavery was.
Okay.
At some point, people are like, I'm not really sure where I stand on a particular subject, but I hate the constant fighting about it. And then they're willing to fight themselves. But in the end, I've argued that slavery is a lot like communism in the 1960s, in the sense that it pulls an entire generation of men into a black hole. I didn't even mean that metaphorically.
Yeah.
But they got sucked into a fight they didn't even have any control over anymore. Because the truth is, the American Civil War was launched by politicians and their failures, and the rich and the powerful.
Yeah.
And then this entire generation, first white men, by the second half of the war, now you've got tens of thousands of black men who begin to join up.
Okay, let me ask you this. Okay, and you kind of alluded to this earlier, but let me just put it in this historical perspective. Are people in Minnesota who there's no slavery in Minnesota, let's say, there's stuff in Delaware or whatever, do they hear of slavery every day in the news? And to go with what you said, I'm just tired of hearing about what they're doing down in the South. And because there are news reports and so on and so forth, what's going on? Or you can operate back then and not know and be immune to it. That's my point.
There's two things. So if you read a newspaper for any time in the 1850s, the discussion about slavery was front and center. The Dred Scott decision was not unknown. That this idea that the Supreme Court had ruled that black people had no rights at all in court. So if you read the newspaper, yes, you were aware. But the other component is, this is an interesting one. You brought up Minnesota. There are, between 1840 and 1860, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of immigrants who come to this country. We all know about the Irish, but there were many Germans and many Scandinavians, like my people, Swedes and Swedes and Norwegians.
Right.
They didn't like slavery. They just thought it was wrong because they saw the oppression of Europe and they had left that. So while you can't say they were abolitionists, because they weren't, they just hated the system. It's also a conflict with the free market system. And this is what Abraham Lincoln actually argues, and it's effective with those groups of people, that slavery was just wrong. It was just morally wrong. Now, that doesn't mean you may be down with equality, but you know that slavery is wrong. And for white people in 1850, 1860, even 1870 after the war, you had to convince them of the immorality of the situation.
Okay, let me ask you this. Is that wrong on the front of the brutality of how they treated Black people? Is that the major part of the wrong? And or is some of the wrong not okay, that I'm gonna leave it at that. Is that the major part of the wrong, is the brutality? Because if they didn't be so brutal and the things that they did, the raping of the women, so on and so forth, could that have lessened how the hate of it?
I think that for the average white Northerner who was not an abolitionist, they instinctively know that slavery is wrong. And they know it's wrong because it doesn't exist in their community. Now, conversely, in the South, there was no question that it was right because it was ever present in your community from the time you were a child. And so you have these two great factions in the country who are great. You know, there's actually a galvanizing force within the Black community. Everyone in the Black community, enslaved or free, not only knew it was wrong, they knew they were equal to anyone else. The white community, you know, I think I've learned through some of my interactions with my Black friends is that white people were as conditioned by this awful institution as Black people were. The only difference is we weren't the ones that were enslaved.
Right.
But we were taught all the lies. We were fed all the propaganda.
Is that right?
Oh, for generations. Why do you think the idea of Black men is so scary to so many white people? Because it was pounded into generations of white people's heads.
Okay, but again, I want to go back to this brutality. They put pictures of them hanging Black men on. Did they show that on the newspapers? And the people in the North said, that's the real reason why I hate this. You follow my question? Because that's what a picnic was, from what I hear.
I can't give you an absolute answer, but there were many people from before the war and even afterwards who kept hearing the stories. They kept reading the newspaper articles. They kept seeing the photographs. And you know, your first instinct is, well, that's the exception. That's not the norm of what's going on.
Really?
So
okay.
if you spin this forward, let's go to 1963. Why do you think Dr. King wanted to get the TV people to Selma?
I got you.
He wanted people in the North. He wanted people in Wisconsin and New Hampshire who'd been immune to seeing it personally. He wanted them to see it. When you are hosing down children, sick German shepherds, all of a sudden what people in the South had always known to be true, now all of a sudden a whole generation of Northerners are beginning to see.
I got you. Because it seemed like when they, the one photo, and I know there's others, of them hanging a guy and they're sitting around watching, they were proud of that moment.
Oh, absolutely. It was a social gathering because in many ways you were dispensing of a problem and you were celebrating how you were doing it. It's the worst. I don't even have words for it. I literally don't.
But you know, as we talk about the Civil War, there were battles that, I mean, how could I walk up to another human being on and I'm gonna stick my bayonet, my bayonet inside you, kill you on the premise of an attitude that you have about slavery? I mean, somebody had to really convince me, or I personally had to feel that it's worth it.
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, and I think people to this day it seems so confounding. How did it come to a war? Well, it came to a war because of the issues of race and slavery.
Right.
There was one side that was utterly committed to maintaining that. that system, that hierarchy, that issue of white supremacy, because that's at its root, that white people were superior to black people. Now, then you have the other side. They don't have these. Now, the abolitionists did. White and black abolitionists obviously did. The average white Northerner didn't have those convictions, let's say, that white Southerners did, but they still believed that the country should not come undone. The country should not be ripped apart by a rebellion, which they knew full well was rooted in the issue of slavery. So,
and that was the other thing. When what was the camel that broke was the straw that broke the camel's back when the Southerners in those states said we're going to succeed.
Right.
So then that's when Lincoln, and how many people supported him? Was he a standalone guy, or was he had a whole bunch of Congress people on his side saying, hold on, now y'all have really gone too far.
The straw that really breaks the camel's back is the firing on Fort Sumter.
Right.
To white Northerners, Fort Sumter was the equivalent of Pearl Harbor and 9/11 to our generation.
Really?
They saw an attack on a U.S. military installation as just having now gone too far. But to address your question about Lincoln, so Lincoln, of course, is reviled by some people today. He's also been somewhat made into a martyr. Abraham Lincoln was an incredibly savvy politician. So there were two things that he believed in the very fiber of his DNA, is that the Declaration of Independence meant what it said. All men are created equal. He believed that those words were literal. Yes, there was slavery in America, but a creator, a God, had made us equal. He believed it.
Right.
That's what the founders had said.
Right.
But as a lawyer, so he hated slavery. He hated the brutality of it. He did not believe that the natural condition of a human being was to be a slave. He didn't frankly give a damn what the Old Testament Bible said about slavery. He believed slavery was wrong.
I got you.
But as a lawyer, he knew that slavery was protected by law. But he decides to take a stand on its expansion. And this was where he was so savvy. He simply said, I will tolerate it where it exists, but I will not let it expand.
Right.
And thus he boxed Southern slave owners in because they knew they had to expand it, and so did Lincoln. And I know people will say, well, he didn't really believe in equality. I don't think he did. It's pretty clear he did not.
Right.
But when he became president and he met people like Frederick Douglass, because Lincoln was even talking about colonization early in the 1860s, because Lincoln knew how awful and terrible prejudice or bigotry was in the country.
Right.
And it was people like Frederick Douglass who said, hey, I don't want to go to Africa. This is my home. And at that point, I think Lincoln begins to see that there is equality. I think that's why Lincoln moved to finally arming black men, because he began to see his own perception was wrong. It wasn't just that the Declaration of Independence meant what it said and that God made us equal, that under law, we are also equal. And so that begins this whole unraveling starting in 1863 with the Emancipation Proclamation. So he is a person who grows.
I'm gonna move up the timeline in a second and go to what your organization is, so on and so forth. But I guess I got one more question in this regard. Could America have survived and been great without slavery? What would that have looked like?
Oh gosh, what a question. No, there's no way that the country. There's no way that the country develops the way that it does without slavery. However,
no, hold on. Let me stop you right there. There's no way that the people who had the plantations could pay some kind of wage to the black people to do the work that they did without getting it for free?
Well, there's a difference between could they have and would they have. Because, see, you would have had to have slavery not exist going back to 1619.
Right.
See, it was always there. So I don't believe that the country would have ever been created if there had been a move toward abolition between 1776 and 1790. There would never have been a United States.
I had another lady say that, and
I don't believe that it would have, because what's interesting is what plays out between 1790 and the Civil War. If you look in Michigan, Minnesota, New York, Pennsylvania, you're beginning to have a free labor market that develops. And largely it was white, but it began to embrace immigrants. It began to embrace some free black men. But the problem was the free labor market grew much more slowly. The slave market is where you made your dollars. That's how you could become a millionaire.
When you say a free labor market, and what does that mean? Indentured servants?
No, it means no slavery. It means the average white farmer in Pennsylvania is farming his own land. That's why you don't see big mansions in Iowa, because the average farmer was farming 50, 75, 80 acres. He didn't have 1,000, because the only way you could farm 1,000 acres was you had to have the labor to do it, and the free labor system wouldn't allow it.
And you can't pay them a wage?
You could, but again, it's could you or would you? And then after the war, you actually begin to see through technology and forcing people to pay wages, it does begin to unfold. But that's the point. They were forced to do it.
I got you. The organization, tell us about the organization that you run and the museums and things of that sort. What's the name of it again? What have you?
The name of the organization is the Battle of Franklin Trust. It was created about 12 years ago to manage 2 sites in Franklin, Tennessee, both of which existed for about 40 years before the Civil War. At both places, there was a significant enslaved story. 44 enslaved people at one site, 28 at the other at the outbreak of the war. So there was this long history leading up to the war.
Is it plantations?
Yeah, for lack of better terms.
Okay.
Large farming, not cotton or tobacco or anything like that. Corn and grain, a lot of livestock, but they were very, very wealthy. And then the Battle of Franklin, which occurs on November 30th, 1864, just 5 months before the end of the war, explodes, consumes both farms, very heavy fighting. It's a hideously violent battle, almost 10,000 casualties in about 5 hours.
Is that right? Okay.
And then just this past spring, we took over management of another site with a long pre-war history and even bigger enslaved story, 75 slaves there. That's a true plantation, if you will. It's called Rippavilla. And it's involved in the action right before the Battle of Franklin. So really all three sites, all 3 family stories, all 3 enslaved stories are all part of the sort of fabric of this area leading up to the Civil War. But the families live here for about a century. So we have the pre-war, the post-war, and the war. I think it's, in my opinion, it's the most impactful period in our history. And I say that because it's the period of our history that still impacts us today. I mean, obviously, the founding of the country is probably the most impactful.
Yeah,
sure. Freedom of speech, Second Amendment, all that sort of stuff.
Sure.
But 1800 to 1900, oh man, I mean, it's everything about America that's good, that's bad, that's different.
I got you.
Country changing and evolving.
Let me ask you this now. Let's choose one of the sites, for have you. What's the history of that site? Who owned it? Does the family still live there? It's just how many buildings are there? That kind of thing.
Which site did you
Yeah,
ask
you
about?
pick one.
Well,
You can pick
they're
them
all
all, but I mean, what's there? It's a house. It's
they're all pretty similar in the sense that the families have not lived at any of the homes since 1896, 1905, and 1920. So they've all been gone a long time. They were private residences for several decades, and they've been open to the public for 20 years, 40 years, and 50 years. What's left on site? Each site has the original home. Each site also has an original enslaved dwelling. Each site also has some other outbuildings like a smokehouse and a spring house where they got fresh water. So they're
okay.
actually, they're actually a pretty insightful look, both from a land perspective, from a family enslaved architectural perspective. They're kind of a window into the 19th century.
So you can see maybe the actual furniture that was there back in those days in one of those sites, that kind of thing.
Some of it.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
there's furniture in all the homes.
And then you say on one of the sites, all of them, they're the slave cabins, the actual slave cabins in the back.
There's at least one slave dwelling at each site.
Now you said there was a battle there that was very brutal. What's the story of the battle? How many? You said a lot of people died, but no one destroyed those buildings.
No, the buildings were damaged. There were blood stains in one house, bullet holes,
really?
strike marks, and ricochet marks on the other. But this battle was all about Nashville, Tennessee. The Confederate Army was trying to retake Nashville late in the war, and the U.S. Army, trying to defend Nashville, laid quite a pounding on the Southern Army, and that's why just a few months later the war ended. Now, I will also say 2 weeks after the Battle of Franklin, Battle of Nashville occurs, and it is at the Battle of Nashville that there were quite a number of USCTs, United States Colored Troops, who were engaged. So just kind of an extension of what we talk about every day is one of the 2 or 3 largest battles in which Black troops were engaged.
But on the Battle of Franklin, the northern people, as I think I got you said, they were there because they had won it. The Confederates are coming back to try to take it over.
Correct.
So at 2 o'clock in the morning, or do you all know at what sometime in the morning, the Confederates show up and now they're shooting at each other behind trees, or how does that look?
Well, the U.S. Army arrives early in the morning. They're simply trying to get out of Franklin, but they can't get across the river. Confederate Army attacks them late in the afternoon, beginning about 4 o'clock. But it's dark by 5. The bulk of the battle was actually fought during the night. Really? So it is a close quarters, in the dark, just slugfest. It's as bad as armed conflict could be. And to go back to our earlier point, this is what the war had come to. You had in Franklin, Tennessee, 40,000 white men just beating each other to death over what direction the country was going to take.
Are they just shooting at each other, or is there hand-to-hand combat?
Everything you can imagine. Hand-to-hand, picks, axes, spades, shovels, their bare hands. It's just awful.
Is there a cemetery near there to what they did to bury the dead?
There is actually a Confederate cemetery not far from where I'm at Carton. There's also a national cemetery east of here in Murfreesboro where the U.S. dead were buried.
But who won? So who won the battle? The North did.
The U.S. Army.
They won the battle.
Evacuated and went to Nashville that night.
I think you just answered it. When they won the battle, the Confederates retreated and went back to Nashville. Is that what you just said?
The Confederates actually pursued the U.S. Army, and that's why there's a battle at Nashville 2 weeks later.
Oh, okay. And so the picture that I saw is a historical marker of some sort.
Right.
Of what is that?
I think the marker that you saw was a marker that we unveiled at Rippavilla about 3 weeks ago, and it tells the story of some of the enslaved men who were there, who escaped slavery in late 1863 or early 1864 and joined the U.S. Army. We know of at least 4 of those men who escaped bondage and joined the U.S. Army. So not only joined the U.S. Army to fight for their own freedom, they were fighting to defend a country in which they were not even citizens. That's how strongly they felt.
Yes. What is are you one more question? You the name of your organization, but it does not name the sites themselves.
It does not.
And that's kind of a peculiar scenario, isn't it?
Well, it's unusual because the sites used to all be run individually. So there used to be a Carter House Association.
Okay.
So we just consolidated everything together into one thing.
Oh, is there as again we come to close, is there do you do Civil War enactments?
Okay, now you're hitting close to home. We used to, but we do not. We have living history events where people will portray soldiers.
Yes.
We do not reenact combat any longer. We haven't for years. Okay. I have come to believe that reenacting combat is in many ways just in poor taste. It's like, you know what? I got to tell you the story.
Okay.
Years ago, there was some conversation about having a reenactment, and everybody would get out and they'd applaud, and okay, you know, and everybody hoot and holler. And I just said I thought it was wrong. And someone said, "Well, why?" And I said, "I just think recreating a place where people are dying and how they died is just, it's like kabuki theater." Okay. I said, "But you know, if we're going to do that, we should recreate like a slave auction. You know, if we're going to have a reenactment, let's recreate that, right?"
I got you. I got you.
And of course, everybody was like, "Oh God, no, we can't do that."
Right.
And I was like, "Why not?" You know, so we ignore one thing, but we're going to play make believe with the other. And I said, I don't think we should be recreating any of it. Our job,
I got you,
as writers and scholars and historians and tour guides, is to be honest with people about what happened.
I got you. I think when we talked on the telephone, you mentioned some other upcoming events or plans that you all have, unveilings or something like that, right?
So after Charlottesville, 4 years ago, myself and 3 pastors got together and we pitched the idea of what we began to call the fuller story, which was to tell a more inclusive component of the Black experience, not just here in Franklin and in this area. And we proposed it by putting interpretive markers in the town square around, are you ready for this? Around a Confederate monument. Now, there were many people who were completely opposed to this idea, but the city saw the wisdom, they supported it, and throughout the process, we also decided that it would be a great idea to create a bronze statue to a USCT soldier. I am happy to tell you just yesterday, I got photographs of the finished product.
Okay.
So this will be a Black man in a blue uniform. He will represent roughly 180,000 Black men who put on the blue uniform between 1863 and 1865. And his statue will be unveiled in the town square of Franklin, Tennessee on October 23rd, 2021.
Okay.
He will take his rightful place right there in front of the courthouse.
Okay.
Where some escaped Black men became soldiers. I think it is long overdue.
One more question here. Where is Franklin, Tennessee?
It is about 20 miles straight south of Nashville.
Okay. What is there a question that I have not asked you? Closing remarks? What's the website? When are the locations open, people to visit, so on and so forth?
I'll go backwards. We're open 7 days a week. So we're easy to find. Website, it's just www.boft.org. So that has information on all 3 homes, different tours that we offer. Questions? I think I'll end with this. In 5 years, we as Americans will hopefully be celebrating and commemorating the founding of this country. And this country was founded on the promise, the truth, that all men are created equal. And between 1861 and 1865, we went to war to determine whether that document meant what it said or not. And I am here to tell you, it always meant what it said. We fought a war to prove it. It took us 100 years to get to equality, but
you're much further
I remain confident and hopeful that the average person in this country always gravitates toward good and the decent. And sometimes our progress seems to take too long, but
yeah,
we've survived 250 years, and I just think it's a wonderful time to finally be able to appreciate all of our history, not just convenient pieces of it. And the Black experience has been as much a part of this history as anyone. As anyone. And let's just say it. It doesn't take anything away from me to admit that. So just admit it.
I love it. Everybody, I told you, this is what I do with Strong Inspirations. I find these guys, I find these tough, these passionate people, these conscious people who put their career to study this. And then every day they do some work in this regard to tell others. Strong Inspirations, come on, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button on this video, because I know you opened your eyes, you opened mine. I love it. Hit the notifications bell, so when the videos come up, you get a ding, electrocuted, something happens to you, you and your computer, and I say that figuratively. Tell somebody about Strong Inspirations. And so to you, my friend, I want to say with all sincerity, I want you to stay strong, stay safe, stay on your grind. I love what you're doing, running that museum, the people there that are also helping you make it a better place. Keep coming up with those ideas to preserve the history, all sides, the good sides. And with that, I'll say bye-bye, we out. Peace.
All right, thank you.
Yep.